What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of At a Glance, this series in which I give you an appetizer sample or glimpse into a particular faction in 40k, with the goal always being helping you decide if you want to look further into that force on your own, or maybe you start collecting that force as well. So up on the chopping block this time by viewer request is going to be the Flesh Eaters Space Marine chapter, a loyalist Space Marine chapter from the third founding that is descended from the Blood Angels. So the Flesh Eaters admittedly don't have much at all written on them officially. They are basically, I would say, Rogue Trader era for stuff, but I decided to go ahead and give it a shot anyway because I can go over some basic stuff and compare and contrast it and bring it up in the light of modern stuff that we know about in 40k or particular other Space Marine Force or what have you. So you still get some decent insight into these guys to help you decide if you want to look further into them on your own or starting to collect them. Now, there was an unofficial fan-based website for the Flesh Eaters to kind of build them up more. It was all unofficial, but it was cool. The site's defunct now, as far as I can tell, but some of that fluff may have been distributed into the aether, as it were. So I really limited what I'm going to be saying here, or I really am limiting, I should say, what I'm going to be saying here, to what really is official GW stuff only. Should you encounter some of the unofficial stuff, more power to you if you like it and want to use it. But I'm really wanting to limit this stuff to um, official stuff only. So, with that said, let's look at the look of the Flesh Eaters Space Marines. Now, one of the artworks that you might see of them from back in the day almost depicts them in an orange armored light, but in reality, their color scheme is red. Now, it's not Blood Angels red, it's not Blood Ravens red in terms of being those shades of red. It's more like the Exorcist style of red, a very crimsony red, if that makes any sense, is what the Flesh Eaters have going on for their entire power armor. No trim differences, no nothing. Um, the chest emblem is kind of up to conjecture. You could do it in bone and silver and gold, or keep it red if you wanted to. Kind of dealer's choice there. The weapons are black or silver. Their helmet lenses are green. They have a white stripe down their helmet center if you so desire to do that, maybe for your veterans or your sergeants, whomever. Just kind of an idea there, if you want. And as well, on Mark 6 armor, they tend to do kind of the grinning, toothy maw approach that we see on World War II fighter planes, for example. I forget what that's called. It's got a specific name. But there's artwork of them doing that on their Mark 6 powered armored helmets. Whether or not you do that is completely up to you. That'd be kind of tough given the scale, but it is something to think about if you want to further differentiate your force and you're good at doing that small detail stuff. Their symbol is a very simple symbol of basically it's white, and it's what it is a little white maw in the background, at least implied to be in background, and in front of it, at least implied to be in front of it, is an upper jaw with fangs, like it's going to eat you or something. Not a bad symbol, very simple and almost primitive. I say that because when I see it, I just I gravitate towards the idea of it being an orc glyph, even though it's not. So I don't know. It's just food for thought there. But that's their symbol. The other shoulder pad, you could do it with ranking structure. You could do it just using Blood Angel blood drops, what people tend to do, stuff like that. Kind of open ended there. So that's their look. Simple, effective, and it's fitting given their name, the Flesh Eaters. With that said, they are from the third founding. A very bloodthirsty and flesh thirsty chapter, you could say, or flesh craving chapter. They have an unnatural craving, not just for blood, but flesh as well, hence their name, the Flesh Eaters. Now, this is kind of like the red thirst, you could say, in general, that the Blood Angels try to suppress and not give into too greatly at times. It looks like the Flesh Eaters are afflicted with that kind of just from the get go, and it's not just blood, it's also flesh. I want to back up here for a moment and state blood drinking and flesh eating rituals are not unique to Blood Angels Gene Seed. It's something that basically most every chapter does in some way, shape, or form. Um, just about. So it might be a great deal more subtle, more sophisticated, kind of like a goblet of blood type of deal, and drinking it for a ritual reason of whatever purpose. Um, but clearly, with the flesh eaters, it's that, and it goes way beyond it. They have an unnatural craving for it that they have really no defense against. Meaning, blood angels, for example, will suppress the red thirst so they don't give in to having any blood desires of drinking it or anything. They'll suppress it. The flesh eaters don't. They have an unnatural craving for it, and they must, and they do. And this leads to them having what is viewed as near cannibalistic practices. And what's interesting about this is you could state this is almost like how the Sons of Malice's stuff was before they were deemed traitor, and in different series the flesh eaters have remained loyal. So it makes you kind of wonder what was the deciding factor between the two, outside of the concept of chaos taint, which may or may not have been present in the Sons of Malice when they were deemed traitor. Who knows? The point is, this isn't the only flesh devouring cannibalistic tendency chapter out there. It is interesting to see it be a loyalist chapter still. So whatever they do is probably barely acceptable by the Imperium's thought process. This hasn't stopped other forces from outright refusing to fight alongside them and only accepting their aid in the most dire circumstances, given how brutal, bloodthirsty, and savage in nature their combat is. They are close combat specialists. That's what they specialize in. They will rip you apart up close and personal. That's what they desire. It helps with their blood and flesh craving, and they have gotten good at it. So, that particularly bloody work is what they do without question, and that plus their tendencies and their rituals, you could say, has earned them a grisly reputation amongst other Imperial forces, and which is why most rarely accept their offer of aid when given the chance. So, with that said, one particular battle they were a part of was the War of the False Primarch, where they and several other Space Marine chapters enacted the will of the High Lords of Terra by destroying 11 chapters of Space Marines that were deemed traitors. Now, not at once, probably one at a time. They hunted down those chapters and put them out. And the Flesh Eaters were one of the forces responsible for doing that in that campaign. So, particularly bloody work that is suited to their nature. Now, one last thing is that they have been listed as fatally undone by their gene seed in one of the later Blood Angel editions of Codices. So one of their later editions labeled the Flesh Eaters as fatally undone by their gene seed, which could basically mean one of two things for you. A, they're extinct. B, they are on a slow downward spiral that they won't be able to recover from, kind of like the Flesh Terrors. So, however you want to view the Flesh Eaters is up to you. And until we get more concrete fluff, which probably won't happen, unfortunately, at least not for a while, who knows? Maybe with the next edition we get some more concrete fluff on a lot of forces, but we'll have to wait and see. My point is, until we get that concrete statement and information, you're free to interpret that as you like. And if you are a Flesh Eaters fan and you want them to be around the 41st millennium, you don't have anything specifically stating they're not. At least not yet, right? If that is the case. So, kind of all the more reason for you potentially to collect them, maybe. So that is food for thought and interesting, but if they have been labeled as fatally undone, so regardless of whether they're outright gone or just on that downward spiral, it is a fatal undoing by their own gene seed. It's thought that their gene seed degradation has gone pretty high. This is speculation, but it's thought that they have a much more violent hair trigger for fits of rage because of the whole flaw of the Blood Angel's gene seed. Now, with that said, the one last thing to kind of cover before I talk about collecting them is some special units that we know the Blood Angels have. They are of their gene seed. Whether or not they have sanguinary guard, for example, is going to be up to you. You could point at their fluff and state they do, and you can point at their fluff and state they don't, for basically the same reasons. Really, all depends on how you want to interpret and view it. And I say that specifically because sanguinary guard really weren't a thing when the Flesh Eaters came to be back in the day. So you look at what's kind of new and improved now, and you can say, hey, yeah, the flesh eaters would have that, and it could be representing this. Or you can say, no, the flesh eaters wouldn't have this because of this. And that's up to you. Whether you state that their flaw keeps them from having secondary guard, or their secondary guard are kind of last bastions of sanity in their chapter, who knows? It's up to you. Death Company, that is something that um, you would assume they would have, but it doesn't mean you have to field them. So just because a Blood Angel successor has Death Company, it doesn't mean you have to field it, and just because you don't field any doesn't mean you don't have it. You get what I'm saying? So just something to keep in mind for the Flesh Eaters as well. I would think they have it. Whether or not you want to use them, it's up to you. So, rules-wise, for collecting these guys, it would be I would say normally the Blood Angels Codex is the way to go, and that basically still holds true. Only the next edition of 40k isn't out yet, and I don't know if the Blood Angels are going to have their own rule book, and I'm still going to call it a codex, which I assume they will be too. So I don't know if the Blood Angels will have their own codex when that comes out, or if it'll be kind of lumped together with something else. I don't know. Whatever the case is, whatever codex in question has Blood Angels in it, being their own or otherwise, that's the book to utilize, and the Blood Angel stuff is what you should be utilizing from within it. It's just a no-brainer there. They're of their gene seed, of their descent, clearly because they're of their gene seed, and their tendency and the specialty is close combat, assault, kind of shock, strike tactics. All of it works well and plays nicely with the Blood Angel stuff, so it just kind of is almost a no-brainer there. When it comes to collecting them model-wise, you have plenty of options because all the generic bits and kits from Forge World and GW are going to play nicely together. Even chaosy bits, if you see some pretty cool chaos helmets or shoulder pads that are fitting because they have a skull on them or something, can fit and play nice. Horus Heresy stuff can fit and play nice. Blood Angel specific bits can work for you too. Just make sure there's no specific chapter symbol on there. So it's basically just blood drops or chalices of blood and what have you. Those will all work very nicely for the Flesh Eaters. All that stuff still works for them. So loads of options and customization potential there because, well, Space Marine bits play nicely together. There's a whole bunch of different kits for different chapters and even just generic kits that can all bash together very nicely. So that would really be a case of what you think looks cool and putting it together. Some more dynamic without being crazily dynamic posing might work for them to represent their getting the grip in close combat as fast as possible, or whether it's close combat melee or close shooting combat, just things representing that in your posing and bit bashing together is not a requirement, but just some food for thought. So anyways, that's the Flesh Eaters chapter, a loyalist chapter of Space Marines, barely, but still loyalists with unnatural cravings for blood and flesh, leading to a lot of flesh-eating rituals and flesh-eating beyond it, and blood drinking. With terror, not so much terror, but you have to imagine that their shock, close combat specialty of assaulting is probably terrifying, and a chapter labeled as fatally undone by their gene seed, which could mean that they're gone or that they're slowly spiraling to oblivion. We won't really know until GW comes out and updates us on the fluff for these guys, which they may or may not do in the next edition. We have to wait and see. But anyways, that's it for the Flesh Eaters. I find them pretty cool. It's a shame that they kind of got pushed to the wayside and not really talked about much past the Rogue Trader era days, if you will. But still cool nonetheless. Anyways, thanks for sticking through it. Hopefully you've found this enjoyable. And if any questions, comments, or requests, leave it in the comment section. And until next time, take it easy.